Sometimes you think you understand fear. You've seen the movies, heard the ghost stories, maybe even felt a little chill walking through an old graveyard. But then there are experiences that recalibrate everything. Moments that carve themselves into your very being, leaving a mark you can never truly scrub away. For me, that series of moments actually happened inside a house. Not just any house. The Winchester Mystery House, and what I saw, what I heard, what I felt in there, it changed me forever. Seriously, if you're into stories that will make the hair on your arms stand up and leave you looking over your shoulder for a while, you're in the right place. So if you haven't already, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Trust me, you won't want to. My name's Sam Smith, and I'm an architectural history enthusiast. Or well, I was. After what happened, I'm not sure what I am anymore. Back in, it was about 5 years ago now. I was finishing up my master's thesis, and my topic was the eccentricities of American Victorian architecture. The Winchester Mystery House obviously was a primary case study. I'd read everything, seen all the documentaries, even built a pretty detailed 3D model of some of its more infamous sections. But you can only learn so much from books and screens, right? I needed to experience it. I needed to walk those halls, feel the atmosphere, see the madness with my own eyes. So I packed up my beat-up old Honda, drove all the way out to San Jose, California, and booked a week's stay in a B&B just outside the property. My plan was to take every tour they offered, talk to the staff, get a feel for the place, maybe even convince them to let me poke around some of the less frequented areas for research. Innocent enough, right? A budding academic, a historic landmark, a few days of scholarly pursuit. What could possibly go wrong? My first few days were fine. Interesting, certainly. The house itself is just bonkers. Staircases that lead to ceilings, doors that open onto brick walls, windows in the floor. It's like Sarah Winchester built a perpetual maze. Less a home and more an exercise in architectural paranoia. I took the standard tours, the grand estate tour, the behind-the-scenes tour. The guides were great, full of historical anecdotes, and I was diligently filling my notebooks. But then things started to get weird. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. On the third day, I was in the Hall of Doors. You know, the one with like a million doors, some tiny, some normal-sized. I was jotting down notes about the varied hardware when I felt a distinct, cold breath on the back of my neck. And I mean distinct, like someone was right behind me leaning in. I spun around naturally, nothing, just an empty hallway. The tour group was ahead of me, well out of earshot. I figured a draft, old house, right? Happens. Later that afternoon, I was in the gift shop, looking at some of the reproductions of the house's blueprints. I heard this faint metallic click, like a lock engaging. I looked up. No one was near the display cases. No one was opening or closing anything. It just happened. And I felt this prickle on my skin, like an electric current. I just kinda shook my head, blamed it on being tired. You know, long days of walking, absorbing all that history. But then that night back at the B&B, I was going over my notes, and I swear to you I heard it, a soft, almost melancholic humming. It wasn't coming from outside, not from another room. It felt like it was coming from inside my head. Or maybe from the pages of my notebook. It was a tune I didn't recognize, and it was so faint, so delicate. It was almost more of a feeling than a sound. I tried to dismiss it, put on some music, anything to drown it out, but it lingered just at the edge of my perception, like a mosquito you can't quite swat away. The next day, I was determined to get into some of the restricted areas. I'd been chatting up one of the older groundskeepers, a guy named Frank who had worked there for decades. He was a quiet man, but he had this look in his eyes like he'd seen things. After a lot of coffee and, some persistent but polite badgering. He finally agreed to let me into the south wing. He called it the unquiet section. My heart hammered. This was it. This was where the real insights would be. Frank led me through a series of increasingly narrow, unlit corridors. The air grew heavy, thick with dust and a strange, cloying scent, like old wood mixed with something metallic, something coppery. We reached a heavy oaken door bolted shut. Frank produced a massive rusty key from his belt loop, the kind you only see in old movies. As he turned it, the mechanism groaned, a sound that vibrated through the floorboards. The door swung inward with a drawn-out, mournful creak. The air inside hit me like a physical blow. It was cold, bone-chillingly cold, even though it was a warm California afternoon. And the silence. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a silence that felt filled, heavy, oppressive. The kind of silence that screams. We stepped inside. It was a ballroom, or what was once a ballroom. Dust motes danced in the sparse shafts of light that pierced through grimy, leaded windows. There were faded tapestries on the walls, their colors bleached by time, and a grand piano, its keys yellowed and cracked. But what struck me, what made my blood run cold, were the handprints, faint ghostly handprints, visible in the dust on the piano lid, on the banister of a small, ornate staircase leading up to a mezzanine, even on the glass of a few portrait frames on the wall. They weren't smears, they were distinct, like someone had pressed their palm there and then simply vanished. I was about to ask Frank about them when I heard it again, the humming. But this time it wasn't just in my head, it was in the room, faint, ethereal, coming from everywhere and nowhere. It was like a chorus of low, mournful voices, just out of tune, yet strangely melodic. And then, a whisper. Clearer this time. A woman's voice. Lost, it breathed. So lost, I froze. Every hair on my body stood on end. I looked at Frank. His face was pale, his eyes wide. He'd heard it too. He just nodded slowly, his lips pressed into a thin line. "They're active today," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. "Always active in this wing." Then from the corner of the room near a heavily draped window I saw it. A flicker, a distortion in the air like heat haze, but it was cold. And within that distortion, for a split second, I saw a shape, a form. It was indistinct, shadowy, but it was there. Tall, slender, draped in something dark. And it moved. It shifted just slightly, away from the window, deeper into the shadows. I gripped Frank's arm. My knuckles were white. Did you see that?" I stammered, my voice cracking. Frank just shook his head, a grim expression on his face. "Best not to acknowledge them directly," he said, his voice flat. "Just observe." Observe? My heart was pounding like a drum against my ribs. My academic curiosity had evaporated, replaced by a pure, unadulterated terror. We spent another 15 agonizing minutes in that room. The humming intensified, ebbing and flowing like a phantom tide. The air grew colder, so cold I could see my own breath. And the whispers, they became louder, more distinct, like multiple conversations happening just beyond the reach of my understanding. I swear I heard names being called, faint cries, the sound of glass shattering from an invisible source. Then the piano, the grand piano in the center of the ballroom. Its keys, old and yellowed, began to depress. Slowly, one by one, then in a discordant, jarring sequence. Not a melody, just random heavy thumps as if someone was angrily slamming their fists down. A loud, guttural thud echoed through the room. My breath hitched in my throat. I looked at Frank. He was staring at the piano, his face a mask of weary resignation. But then as the last key depressed, I saw it. On the bench, Where no one had been sitting, a faint, almost transparent indentation formed on the dusty velvet cushion, like someone had just stood up from it. And that's when the climax hit. The room plunged into near total darkness. Not just dim, black. The faint light from the windows vanished. A sickening, oppressive weight pressed down on me, as if the very air had become solid, and the sounds. Oh God, the sounds. The whispers exploded into a deafening scream. Not a single scream, but a chorus of tortured, agonizing wails. It was pure anguish, pure terror, amplified 1,000 times. It clawed at my eardrums, tore at my sanity. I could feel icy fingers, not metaphorically but physically, brushing against my face, pulling at my hair. My heart was a jackhammer, threatening to burst out of my chest. I couldn't breathe. It was like being buried alive, but instead of dirt, I was suffocating on pure dread. Then in the absolute blackness I saw them, pinpricks of light. Hundreds of them, faint shimmering like distant stars. But they weren't stars. They were eyes. Glowing eyes swirling in the void, all staring at me. And from the center of that swirling vortex of light and sound, a voice deep and resonant, ripped through the screaming. Not a whisper this time, a roar. A voice that wasn't human. A voice that was pure, unadulterated malice. "Get out!" it bellowed. The sound vibrated through my bones, through the very floor. It was a command, an expulsion infused with such raw power that my legs gave out. I stumbled, falling to my knees in the dust. I could feel Frank pulling at me, his hand a frantic, desperate grip on my arm. But I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by the sheer, overwhelming terror. Those eyes, those countless malevolent eyes. They were closing in. The screams intensified, reaching a crescendo of pure, maddening torment. I thought my skull would crack open. I thought I would die right there, smothered by the collective agony of the house. I don't remember how we got out. I just remember Frank, his face ghostly pale, half dragging, half carrying me through those dark corridors. The oppressive weight lifted as we stumbled back into the sunlit, main section of the house. The screams faded, replaced by the mundane sounds of the tour groups, the distant murmur of voices. It was like emerging from a nightmare, but the cold, clammy sweat on my skin, the trembling in my hands, the taste of bile in my mouth, it was all too real. I didn't finish my thesis there. I didn't even stay another night at the B&B, I just left. I drove all the way back home in a daze, the hum and the whispers still echoing in my ears. The image of those glowing eyes burned into my retinas. It's been 5 years. 5 years. And honestly, it still feels like it happened yesterday. I couldn't look at old houses the same way. I couldn't even look at my house the same way. Every creak, every shadow, every unexpected draft, it sends a jolt of pure terror through me. I hear the hum sometimes when I'm alone in the quiet, just at the edge of my hearing. And I swear, sometimes when I close my eyes at night, I see those eyes. Thousands of them, staring, judging, watching. I tried to write about it for my thesis, a factual account of the architectural oddities. But every time I tried to put pen to paper, the terror would grip me. My hands would shake, my stomach would churn. I finally just changed my thesis topic to something completely mundane. Something safe. Final chill. The Winchester Mystery House isn't just a house. It's a living, breathing entity, a monument to one woman's fear, and the countless spirits she trapped within its walls. They say Sarah Winchester built it to appease the spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles, to confuse them, to keep them from finding her. But I think she just built a prison, for them, and for anyone who dares to truly listen. And sometimes late at night, when the wind howls just right, and the silence in my own home feels a little too heavy, I wonder if one of those trapped spirits, one of those lost screaming souls, didn't manage to follow me out. Just a little piece, a whisper, a shadow, just enough to remind me that some doors once opened can never truly be closed. What happened inside the Winchester Mystery House? It's still happening inside me. New episodes coming tomorrow at 7 p.m. You won't want to miss it.